hope that this will symbolize cooperation between Uzbekistan and the United States, not only on political level, military to military, economic cooperation, but it will symbolize cooperation of Uzbekistan between Uzbekistan and the United States on scientific areas, culture, exchanging, people-to-people communication. And I think it will encourage our people and students around these universities to pay visit to Uzbekistan. And if you allow me, I will start our ceremony.
Thank you, everyone. Please welcome inside.
Amazing event. Here the world is in chaos, and there are 4 or 5 points of crisis around the planet. And here we are, gathered to talk about a guy who lived 1,000 years ago. And that's so, who is this guy? Beruniy. Well, let me just say that he was born in the territory of what is now Uzbekistan, in a city that doesn't exist, literally doesn't exist. It was washed into the river, disappeared. But that's where he was born and raised. He was born in 970 AD, think of it, a long time ago. That's way a century plus before the Norman conquest of Britain. So he was born there, and why are we sitting here now? And why should his bust be in front of the Embassy of the Republic of Uzbekistan in Washington or anywhere else? Well, it's very simple. He measured the Earth more accurately than anyone down from the 17th century. Now that's a big deal in itself. He's not the first to try, by the way. Greeks beat him on that. But he was far, far, far more accurate. What's amazing is that the technical equipment that he needed to do this, he built himself with his own hands. And frankly, if we had the material here, the wood and so on, we could have the technical equipment that he used to measure the Earth down to about 4 decimal points. We could have that equipment built by dinner time. It's that simple. Talk about genius. But even more striking is that to do the calculations that he did to measure the Earth, he used sine law, sine tables. You know, some of you took it up math and sometime to remember signs. Well, he didn't just use the known, all the sine tables came from India. And the world had its own conception of time. You know, time began with Alexander the Great, said one group, or this or that. They all had their own systems of time and their own way of measuring years. And he said, you know, this is a god-awful mess. I'm going to come up with a single global time. Now, he didn't just sit down and say, I'm going to invent global time. He collected every known time system in the world and asked of each of these, this is where it gets clever, what are the astronomical bases for their conclusion? And they had scales for measuring and all this sort of thing. But he said, wait a minute, Is there any way to combine them all in one system? He said, of course, what we need to do is devise a system for measuring the specific gravity of any substance. Now, we don't, in our daily life, get mixed up with specific gravity. But you can't build any modern machine or use any modern substance without using specific gravity. It is the core concept for 20 fields that we don't even think of today. But it is there. And he, therefore, devised a machine. He's a tinkerer. He's obviously good with his hands. He devised a machine by which he could measure the specific. But I want to conclude with two further points. First is that he did most of this work out in Kath and then across the border in Turkmenistan, which is now Kunyar-Gench, just close by. That's where he did a lot of his work. Up till the time that a very nasty guy, one of the truly evil people on the planet, Mahmud of Ghazni, showed up with an army. And Beruniy, at that point in his life, had been selected to be foreign minister, vizier. He took a bureaucratic job. And he was vizier when Mahmud of Ghazni decided to bring his 150,000 man army. That's roughly the scale of Putin's latest recruitment. He bring his 150,000 man army plus tens and tens of elephants to Kunyar-Gench. And of course he obliterated the place and captured Beruniy. And Beruniy was sent as an honored conquest back to Ghazni in Afghanistan, where he spent the rest of his life. He made one trip home when he was up in his late 60s, but basically all the stuff I was talking about was work he did in Ghazni in Afghanistan. Can you imagine? And curiously, the Taliban is now involved in a brouhaha over restoring Beruniy's tomb. And a good friend of several of us here in this room from Uzbekistan is leading the charge to have it done and restored by Central Asians, and their competition is Iran, which has suddenly decided that because Beruniy spoke a Persianate language, not Farsi, that he was one of us, which he wasn't. But that's a detail. My second point is that Beruniy was only one of the hyper geniuses of that era from that place. The standout, and the list could be lengthened indefinitely, but the other guy who was absolutely on the same rank with Beruniy was Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna. Avicenna was an exact contemporary. That's one of my, I'm rather proud of having nailed that down. And this was a case, they knew each other, they knew about each other, they couldn't stand it. and it was partly male guys in their late 20s doing what guys in their late 20s do. They were together for the same place, same time for 7 years. And there's absolutely no evidence of their interaction. I mean, they hated each other. And they'd had a really nasty exchange. And they never reconciled. But Beruniy said that the basis for any true statement, he said, must be mathematics. He says, if you can't measure and count it, I don't want to hear about it. He had a place for faith. Okay, that's another matter, but not a big place. Avicenna, who basically codified the entire field of medicine, and if you buy his canon of medicine, it's this thick on the shelf. It's probably 700-page volumes, and I think there's 6 of them. And they're still in print, by the way, because this Avicenna's treatment of medicine was gospel from Europe to India for 600 years. Absolutely everyone depended on it. He did it. Now, but beyond that, like Beruniy, he was interested in everything. And one of his deepest passions was philosophy, metaphysics, theology. And in that field, he was as much a genius as he was in medicine or as Beruniy was in all his fields. So much so that his reflections on faith, on theology, on metaphysics, on logic, and so on, became absolutely universalized throughout the known educated world, including Europe. And St. Thomas Aquinas has plenty of good, honest footnotes to Ibn Sina in his great work. And so here you have a guy from a Muslim culture writing absolutely fundamental works that are accepted as 100% valid, not only by Christians, but by Jews. Maimonides was very big on Ibn Sina too. Now, the final point here is that if Beruniy emphasized that truth comes from numbers, measurement, Ibn Sina took a very radically different tack. He said it comes from logic. And he goes back to Aristotle and refines and develops Aristotle's logic in all sorts of interesting ways. But he says, this is the path to truth, logic. So here you have a standoff. You wonder why these two guys didn't like each other. Well, Ibn Sina ended up, he fled before Mahmud got there. Mahmud wanted both of these guys to adorn his court in Afghanistan. But Ibn Sina got away before Mahmud's army got there. Had he stayed, had Beruniy not found somehow gone over to the other side, they would have been trampled to death because the whole administrative elite of the country that then ceased to exist was herded by Mahmud onto the central square and crushed, stomped on by a herd of elephants. But Ibn Sina escaped this, and he ended up going from court to court. Beruniy was a absolute mole. He liked to work and sit at his desk, do his research, and not social. Ibn Sina was a very classy-looking guy. We know this because his skull was analyzed about 40 years ago, and his looks were reconstructed. He was a very classy-looking guy, and he was hypersocial and hypersexual, I have to add also. We have good evidence on all this. Why I mention these two guys together? Because if you take them together, it's as big a grasp of all human knowledge as existed any time before then. And you didn't see the likes of this until you got up to people like Newton and so on, Leibniz and a few people much, much, much later. So these are certified geniuses. They both lived in absolutely terrible times. They both at one point or another had judgments against them to be beheaded. It's not easy for a scientist to continue his work without a head. But both were condemned to be beheaded. They survived. They persisted. And did they have any of what we consider normal for scientific or intellectual work? Did they have comfort and ease and all that stuff, grants? No, none of it. And yet they did, it's just, which is why we're here today. Thank you.
So thanks so much. I'm very jealous. Fred doesn't need a mic, but I need. So, and first of all, we had a very hard choice regarding the person who should be here at the embassy. Al-Harazmi, Al-Sharnawi, Ibn Sina. We had a lot of people who had a very, a lot of scholars who made a huge contribution to humanity. But Fred told me that if you would like to show the links between the United States and Uzbekistan, and build the cultural bridge between Uzbekistan and the United States, you have to put Beruniy. But now, coming here, he told me that next from Beruniy, you have to put Ibn Sina. So I have a good task. So, but again, Fred is a good friend of not only Uzbekistan, he's a good friend of Central Asia. He's a great promoter of Central Asia. He just finished this brilliant book, and you can have a copy here for free. It's a gift from Uzbek Embassy. So that's a great book, and it's about the history. And unfortunately, in the United States, the people, scholars, they don't know much about Central Asia, about Uzbekistan. Why Beruniy? He's a great scholar, but at the same time, he's representing that we're calling enlightened Islam. So that is example which we would like to show here, that how Uzbekistan has.